Thanks very much, Nicola, and good morning. I'm here to talk about our new redesigned colorectal cancer pathway. And in keeping with Nicola's comments earlier, bowel cancer is a major problem in the UK. We have some of the lowest survival rates in Europe. And in fact, a quarter of patients with colorectal cancer present as an emergency. So it's a really big issue. So we need to look very carefully at the pathways. There is an introduction to this talk, which is a short video, which is actually a bit of a GP promo, so that we could start to communicate the new redesigned pathway better to our colleagues referring those patients. So I'll just put us on to that first, and then we'll come back to discussing. The Vanguard redesigned pathway is a way of improving the direct-to-test pathways for colorectal cancer and upper GI cancer. We're going to bring together the Vanguard partners, which are a group of trusts which work together to improve cancer pathways. A very good collaboration between primary and secondary care. As a result of that, we've been able to improve the quality and efficiency of that pathway. The way we can do this is by efficiently triaging patients for CT colonography more than we did before. And of course, CT colonography not only helps to exclude colorectal cancer, but also cancers that lie outside the bowel, or perhaps other causes which aren't cancer, which may have caused those symptoms.
At the appointment with their GP, a referral via the ERS system will automatically alert the 2-week wait GI cancer team to this patient. They are then within the Vanguard hub, reviewed and triaged by experienced clinicians, including specialist nurses and consultant gastroenterologists. The agreed algorithm ensures the patient is directed immediately to the right test, be this endoscopy or CT imaging. The patient is then contacted via phone at a pre-planned time slot, where they can be pre-assessed and informed of the next steps in their care. This allows early engagement with the patient and enables appropriate support to them. On arrival to the unit, the patient will be met by a member of the team who will assist them through their procedure. Whether this is in endoscopy or CT, the outcome of the investigation is then communicated to the patient and the referring clinician, with any onward management organised quickly as well. Being part of this project has allowed the whole team to appreciate the integrated pathway of clinical care and how we can deliver that for our patients. We've seen a reduction in DNA rates and quicker progress towards effective management for those patients who need ongoing treatment. Ensuring the patient is seen by the right clinician and gets the right test at the right time allows us to deliver an effective clinical service for patients on the suspected cancer pathway.
We've learnt a lot from this process, and we're going to take those lessons and ensure that other trusts which implement a similar programme are able to do so more efficiently and without facing some of the challenges that we've learned to overcome. Always embarrassing watching yourself, isn't it? And Adam looks a lot better on camera than I do. So I think the first thing to say here is that St Mark's have been pioneers in straight-to-test colorectal cancer pathways, but we definitely got it wrong. The principle of straight-to-test, whereby a GP can refer a patient to the hospital, and instead of wasting time in clinic, they go and have a definitive test to see if they've got cancer or not. That concept is brilliant. It's brilliant. But the process and plan for taking those patients through the hospital really needed far more thought. And we were tripping over ourselves with a very complex pathway. In fairness, it had been sort of developed in evolution, where members of the team had seen a problem, perhaps with governance or workflow, and had bolted on a new part to the algorithm. And so the whole pathway became incredibly clunky and inefficient. And so there were drivers for a change in the way we looked at the pathway. And here I would like to talk just a bit about the variable triage and vetting by predominantly consultants. And this is the repetitive interaction that occurs in every single hospital. You might have a straight-to-test pathway in place, but that first GP referral, which comes along on a nice 2-week wait referral form, the referral itself is confusing. Those forms are appalling. Most people would agree that they need to be re-looked at, but that's what we end up with. And then there's a discussion between the triage team, which is often nurse-led, with perhaps a consultant gastroenterologist. We had a 1 PA of consultant gastroenterology time just to support that initial triage. But then when, for example, a patient's sent to clinic or sent for CT colonography, you find the same repetitive processes going through. You might have somebody, for example, who had no hemoglobin checked, and they get to radiology and it goes back to the GP again before it starts the process. Incredibly repetitive. And actually, if you look at the clinical algorithms, they didn't really make much sense. It was very variable. If you asked one gastroenterologist about a patient one day, they would suggest colonoscopy, and the next day a different gastroenterologist might suggest CT colonography. There was no fixity to how patients are looked after. And it is true there are some clinical nuances, but we believe very strongly that a lot of those clinical nuances repeat themselves regularly. You know, we get lots of patients. So it's quite easy to see those patterns and then put that into a clinical algorithm. The interesting thing about changing the algorithm has been that there's not been any disagreement with the algorithm from any of the clinical leads across the working group for colorectal cancer. And that just shows that it makes sense. We also wanted to use clinic. Clinic is not a bad word. Straight to test almost pushed everyone towards a test. But if you're a 30-year-old, you're very unlikely to have bowel cancer. There's something else likely going on that needs to be addressed. If you're 90 years old, it might be the most inappropriate thing to send you straight to test, because you might actually end up with more harm having had the test, remembering that most people don't have bowel cancer. And then GPs weren't happy, because they'd send a patient in with abdominal symptoms and weight loss, for example. They would have a colonoscopy that would say they've got no bowel cancer, but then the patient still has weight loss and bowel symptoms. So what are we going to do? We're going to send it on another 2-week wait pathway or to clinic. So we were finding that was a frequent occurrence, not least because, of course, again, most patients don't have bowel cancer if they have symptoms potentially attributable to it. The advantage of CT colonography is that it looks outside the bowel as well. And if we take out jaundice, urology cancers, gynae cancers, then CT colonography will spot everything else. Okay. So it provides more support and reassurance that the GPs can stop the pathway and just look after the symptoms. And of course, the previous pathway allows the duplication of referral. So the GP is allowed to keep re-referring because some of the IT systems don't talk to each other, and some of the checks in terms of quality as to whether that patient had had a test 6 months ago or a year ago hadn't been done properly or in a consistent and reproducibly robust manner. And so we were finding that patients were re-referred unnecessarily. And then if you think about the vetting tasks, if they occur both in frontline and in the individual departments and clinic, everyone double-checking, triple-checking, it's a hugely inefficient process, and that's what we found. The patients are the same, and yet they end up via the NICE referral forms developed by separate NICE committees on either an upper GI pathway or a lower GI pathway. It's nonsensical. If you have weight loss and epigastric pain, it could be pancreas, it could be transverse colon, it could be stomach cancer. And yet it depends on almost the whim of the GP as to whether they end up having a gastroscopy or a colonoscopy. So we felt the patients are the same. They have very little difference between them. There's a lot of overlap of symptoms, and therefore our clinical algorithm and pathway should address that and reassure the patient that they have neither upper or lower GI cancer. In addition, what about this 2-week wait, non-2-week wait, clinic referred, and so on and so forth? Again, from a patient's perspective, they're the same patient. So we think it's very important that in the phased program we're designing and developing and implementing, that we get rid of those false categories and treat patients the same. If they've got symptoms in their abdomen, they want the GP and they want to make sure they haven't got cancer, they should be dealt with in an efficient, rapid way and not according to which NICE form has been filled in. So this is the redesign pathway, difficult to assimilate, and I'm not going to ask you to, but what we've done is started at the front end, and that's at the point of referral, so that GPs refer consistently and the information they provide is sufficiently of high quality that we can then make a rapid decision as to which pathway they follow, straight to test or to clinic. So that's a nice simple way of looking at it. The other thing that's critical in this new pathway is that we have a patient navigator, because not only in the clunky system we had before, but in reassuring people when we're introducing a new pathway, we want somebody to make sure we don't lose any patients along the way. So this person checks that the patient continues to move through the pathway in an appropriately timed way. And if they're not, then they can flag it with the team and we can intervene immediately. What's been the early results? Well, we're just giving you the results for the first 100. As you saw earlier on the slide, there's been several-fold more than that since. And this is until August last year, to 100 patients. 65% were triaged straight to test. So some people would say, well, shouldn't that be higher? But actually, no, we think it's a very appropriate number who are going to clinic for the reasons I mentioned before. 95% of patients were contacted within 2 working days, 86% of patients triaged within 1 working day, 99% within 3 days, 97% of patients seen within 14 days, and the majority seen within 1 week. No DNAs, which was an interesting and welcome result. And interestingly, we looked at what the duplication rate had been for re-referral, and it had been 9%. So 9% of patients re-referred for lower GI investigation inappropriately. Because if you've had a colonoscopy a year ago and you're re-triaged for colonoscopy a year later, there's a mistake in that pathway. 9% of patients we were able to send to clinic and rethink the pathway for that patient. If you look at the 2 comparisons of EROS was our prior straight to test, not working very well pathway, and the ERS Vanguard pathway here, you can see the shift to the left of the green columns means that we are triaging and vetting more quickly, and you can see the relative things with performance in terms of how quickly we see them. The percentage of breaches is halved, and seeing within 7 days is doubled. And this is a large pie chart where you can see that appropriately, given what I said, CT colonography examines more patients relatively compared to colonoscopy. For some people who don't know, they might think CT colonography is expensive. It's currently at least it's half or less the price of a colonoscopy or flexible sigmoidoscopy. So again, we believe when we're thinking about rolling this out, there are potentially very large savings to be made both regionally and nationally with the development of CT colonography. We've had challenges. It's not been easy. Absolutely not. Change like this never is. And one of the biggest issues has been around GP compliance. We were very careful not to try and change the referral pathway because that would still be at step 1. But we have had to, as you know, introduce ERS. And you know, it's a little bit like you can take the horse to water, but you can't always make it drink. And here, challenges-wise, we've certainly had that as a major issue. Much better now. Recruitment of personnel who are high quality and can provide really high quality triage and vetting has been very important. And with any change, clinical staff and management buy-in has had its challenges over time. And of course, the time that we want to see this happen is often mismatched with the time it takes. What are the next steps? So we've talked about the fact that we're going to get rid of patient categories. So we're going to align non-2-week weights along 2-week weights. And we're also going to bring the bookings teams that have previously been geographically located elsewhere from the triage and vetting. We're going to bring them together and look towards having more information and preparation out in the community, so there's less royal mail of boxes and preparation and so on. We're going to merge teams for efficiency, so we have already created a room where everybody can sit together and work from the same systems. That's going to make things much more efficient. And we're informing and educating GPs, hence the video, and also their patients. And we'd love to see this rolled out across the Vanguard. This isn't about St Mark's, this is very much about the RM Partners group. And from our perspective, happy to support and cajole other groups into implementing this similar pathway. Again, to re-emphasize everyone across the group in the colorectal cancer working group supports the concepts. It's about implementation. That's the only challenge from now. This is some of the patient feedback. We're not going to tell you all the awful things that have been said, but no, actually in general, it's been very, very well received. And as the teams have come on board, both managers and clinicians, it's been, as soon as they've got beyond that, this is change, this is going to be difficult, they've now run and supported it wholeheartedly, and that's been really nice to see. Good. Thank you.